Good afternoon. Welcome to this edition of the Coal Scene. I'm Chris Hamilton, and I'll be your host over the next half hour or so. Joining me in the studio today is Coal Association President Bill Rainey and our Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection, Randy Huffman. Gentlemen, thanks so much for coming by. Looking forward to the next half hour or so, just talking about energy and environmental issues. It's good to have you both here, and we'll just see where we get to.
Appreciate being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Bill, why don't we start by maybe just giving us a rundown, a recap of where we're at today. We hear a lot about layoffs within the coal industry, a lot of gloom and doom out there. Why don't you tell us what's really going on?
Well, it is pretty tough, Chris, as many people know. We got about 3,000 people laid off when you compare it to 18 months ago. Our production is down a little bit compared to last year, but then last year was down compared to the year before. We have lost, comparing 12 and 13, we lost 10 million tons of production. Anticipate losing probably another 4 or 5 this year. When you look back, depending upon how far back you want to look, there's a substantial decrease in the production that we've had here in West Virginia, which accounts for decreased tax revenues and decreased employment. This EPA stuff that's going on with existing power plants, greenhouse gas, the hearings start tomorrow, as a matter of fact, in Pittsburgh and 3 other cities. Is creating such uncertainty around coal industry and around the use of coal to make electricity that it's affecting the financing and it's affecting the future. So it's not terribly bright, but we still have about 19,000 people directly digging coal in West Virginia. And as we talk all the time, they're the best coal miners in the world and they know what they're doing. And we're just going to have to get through this whole process and hope that there's some reason and some practicality on the other end of this, because this administration has not shown, and I'm talking about the federal administration, has not shown any kind of interest in the coal industry or making sure that America's most prolific fuel is used to the advantage of Americans.
That has to be tough. The industry's always had challenges, and there's been some serious challenges over the years, but I'm not sure the industry has ever had a president that's had such a negative bias, seemingly, and really utilizing every resource, every agency that he has to hurt or restrict production from coal mining operations.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they all seem to have had a drink of the Kool-Aid, because, I mean, you can go to MSHA, EPA, OSM, any of them, and they certainly have no interest, or they seemingly have no interest in making sure that the coal industry is viable in, 26 states where coal is produced, and I think coal is used in every one of the states to make electricity. And what we're finding is that the prices of electricity are going to go up when you start using alternative sources of power. So we hope, like Germany, they finally seen the light, and they're going back to building coal-fired plants now, because they absolutely could not afford, nor did they want to deal with the unreliability of alternative fuels to make their electricity.
Do you think we've hit bottom, so to speak? Do you think things might plateau or begin to turn upwards anytime soon?
Well, I hope so. I think a great deal of that depends upon the world metallurgical coal market. And Australia, of course, has, there's too much coal in that market, we're told today. And if it rebounds, then we certainly have a real opportunity here. Exporting our coal is perhaps the best thing that we do. We use about 18 million tons of coal here in West Virginia to make our electricity, and the remainder of it is exported to other states and other countries. But the real deal is to get the coal to the Atlantic shore and even the Gulf of Mexico, and get it to these countries that want it. So we hope that the world economy rebounds. It's not nearly as healthy as everybody wants you to believe it is. That when that economy comes back, they're going to need steel and electricity and all the things that have a basis with our fuel. So we hope that comes back. So we hope we've hit bottom, and then we'll rebound back. We've got to. It's just absolutely so important for our people.
It seems like the export market and the opportunities that states like West Virginia have realized within foreign countries, it seems like that's been a little bit of a saving grace and has helped us minimize what would have been, many more losses in terms of jobs and all here.
Oh, it has been. It truly has, because we export more coal than any other state in the country. And that is huge. And in 2012, it was big. The value of that was tremendous. And the value reduced last year. The volume that didn't necessarily reduce, but the value did because of the world coal market. But we depend on a lot of other countries. And thank goodness they're there and they want our coal, which demonstrates the fact that we have some of the best coal in the world. And we can put it in a rail car or a barge and get it to whoever needs it in this world when they want it and in the quality that they want it.
I have to ask, because I just read it last week, and it's been on my mind ever since, where one or more states up in the Northeast actually purchased coal from Russia, I believe.
From Russia, yeah.
Last winter, I mean, just a couple months ago.
I think it was in Massachusetts. I think it was a utility up there, and they couldn't get it delivered in January and February when they wanted it. It wasn't a matter of the producer not being able to produce it. I think it was a matter of transportation and getting it there, and I guess they threw their hands up and figured, well, we can put it on an ocean ship and get it from Russia,
I mean,
which makes no sense to me at all. But
that's a headline and article you have to read twice before you actually
that's right.
realize that this is occurring.
I thought it was a misprint, but we can load a boat in Norfolk and send it up to them if they want, but for whatever reason.
But the policy implications where we're actually shutting down is what really struck me, where we're working to shut down or restrict coal production from, states like West Virginia, but yet we're bringing in coal to fill that void. There's obviously a need, and we're bringing in that coal from foreign destinations. I know down in the South Atlantic states, there's in the Gulf, there's a little coal coming in from South America and
there is.
Colombian places, and again, that just doesn't seem to square up quite right.
It doesn't make any sense at all, and that's what I say. Everybody in this country, it amazes me, because we have more coal than any other country in the world. And if you applied that to what the Middle Eastern states are doing with oil, then they would be over there rejecting their oil industry. But they're not. They're embracing it and trying to make it healthier and better and more viable. And I just don't understand why we don't get that in this country with this administration. We're not asking anybody to love us. We just simply want them to respect us and the people that mine the coal and what they've done for this country and what they propose to do in the future.
Excellent. I'm being rude to our other guests. Several minutes have gone by.
Well, we don't want to do that.
Other than an introduction, Randy, just really pleased that you've taken time from your busy schedule.
You're welcome anytime.
To join us. When they said you were coming on today, the first thing I thought of is, that you've grown with the agency. You've been with the current agency as we know it, the State Department of Environmental Protections, since it was created. I know you've held many jobs, and today you're running the agency as you have for a couple years. Could you just take a moment maybe and just sort of reflect on the state of the environment and some of the changes, hopefully positive changes that you've witnessed throughout your tenure?
Yeah, I came to what was then the Division of Energy, I think is what it was called, in 1986. I graduated from college in 1985 and came to work for state government actually as a last resort. Just couldn't find work anywhere. I had a mining engineering degree, ironically enough, and couldn't find what I was looking for. So I took this job with the Abandoned Mine Lands Program in 1986, and with a thought that, well, it's enough to give me some health insurance. And I was married, had just gotten married, and like I said, I was building a house, and luckily my wife worked, and so I was just looking to get a start, and figured I would be around for a couple of years and then I'd move on to something else. And fell in love with public service. I never made a lot of money, but it quickly became not about that. I got to travel all over the state. I loved the state. I went from the Abandoned Minelands program, which is a cleanup and remediation type program, to what was the Department of Natural Resources at the time. We were in a waste management business. So I got to be in on the ground floor of some of the Solid Waste Act that was passed in the late 80s. Again, doing cleanup work, except this time I was cleaning up trash and things like that, and just loved it. And served in a variety of capacities over the years. Actually, in 28 years of public service in this organization, my first venture into that of a regulator, my first experience as a regulator, came when I was appointed as the mining director in 2005. So I spent a lot of years in DEP before I ever really was a regulator. So I was mining director in '85. From 2005 to 2008, and then Governor Manchin at the time appointed me as the secretary in 2008. And fortunately, Governor Tomlin asked me to stay when he became governor, and I've enjoyed it. It's been tough at times, had its challenges. The interesting thing about a couple things, I guess, that over the nearly 30 years that I've been here, that I've seen the environment get cleaner, can document cleaner air and cleaner water. But I've also seen the environmental movement, if you will, become more sophisticated. I've seen the public at large become more sophisticated and more intelligent, if you will. And I guess it's the access to information and the technological breakthroughs that we've had. So the environmental debate is more sophisticated and smarter now, I think, than it was in the mid '80s. So I have seen that change. But at the same time, the politics of it have become more sophisticated as well. So it's been an interesting time, but certainly a lot of changes have taken place.
Well, it's interesting. As you were talking, I'm sitting thinking that you've served now under 4 or 5, maybe even 6 governors, and I think that's just a real compliment to the job that you do day in and day out. Not too many people survive one administration to the other, and here you've survived a number of them. And
yeah, I've heard it.
Compliments.
Joe Manchin always said the best government is. The best politics is good government, and I think that's right. I think when you're in public service, if you serve the public the way you're supposed to, that's what matters to people that are elected. They want to serve their constituency, and what people see a lot of the politics, but day to day, day in and day out, the work we do is not about that. It's about public service.
Well, and I hear a lot of discussion and a lot of assessment of Randy Huffman around some of the circles I run in, and I tell you, you're regarded as a very competent and tough regulator, but fair. People have an appreciation for your fairness and objectivity.
Well, and that's what's important, because you have to. I have no trouble sleeping at night. I don't. I love West Virginia. West Virginia comes first. I think what's best for West Virginia has been, really what drives me. I think there's a lot of hope and opportunity here, and this is where I was born. It's where I'll die, and so I think treating people with respect, regardless of what they believe or what they think, and being fair. It's been said that if you always are honest and tell the truth, you don't ever have to write anything down. So.
And you don't have to think about the response twice the next time you give it.
That's
either.
right.
Let's talk for just a moment about mine reclamation. It's interesting when you look over through lens 20 or 25 years old. There was a lot of concern expressed 20, 25 years ago about the quality of mine reclamation work. And then seems like when we got really good at that, when the industry got really good at that, there was then concern about not leaving much behind. And then we started doing all this planning as part of the mine permitting process with an eye towards what can we leave here, what fits this geographical area that we can begin building towards while we're mining. And so there's just been a lot of change, a lot of improvement out there on the ground.
Yeah, I wish that we had the vision in the early years of mining, in the 40s, 50s, 60s. I wish we would have understood the long-term need for infrastructure and economic development the way we do now. Unfortunately, the timing of our post-mining land use thoughts, and we look at it as, well, it's genius to make developable land after the mineral has been removed, so you don't have to pay for that site development twice. And but at about the time we got that figured out and started getting dialed in, the EPA kind of changed its position on mining, and I say kind of, I say that lightly because they did a 180 on mining and really started scrutinizing anywhere that we had valley fills. And the valley fills are necessary to create flat land. And not to get into the politics of any of it, but thinking strictly from an economic development standpoint, in West Virginia, we are trying to. I get calls from the development office on a regular basis, wanting to know, where do we have 1,600 acres? Where do we have 900 acres? They have clients coming in looking for property to develop. They need transportation. They need power, they need water, and they need it flat. They don't have the money to come in and spend millions of dollars trying to create a flat piece of property. And unfortunately, we're kind of behind the competition curve, if you will, with other states. Especially, you don't have to go very far south and it gets flat in a hurry, and it stays flat the rest of the way. And we're trying to compete with that, and it's pretty tough.
Well, it makes sense. And Bill, I know there's a lot of examples around the state today where where an area benefited, because the county commissions, the planning department, different agencies all got together and with an eye towards, what can we leave here, as opposed to just ripping everything out when the mining's done. And there's a lot of good examples around the state.
Oh, there are, and we're working closely with the agriculture department. You've had Walt on the program, I think, earlier, and I know Secretary Huffman, his department's working with our companies and trying to make the veterans, particularly a focus on the veterans, and putting them to work and using some of the reclaimed land now for agriculture purposes, and literally to provide the food that's needed in the schools and the prisons and the public facilities here in the state. But you can go to almost any coal mining county and find some beneficial use of reclaimed land. And as Randy said, if we just had that vision 25, 30 years ago, we'd be so much further along. But it's just been the last 10 that we've been building roads where we mine coal. And
I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, because it's the single most important project to me, and it will be, and I'm afraid it's in jeopardy of not being finished, and that's the King Coal Highway. When I think about economic development, and I look at southern West Virginia is struggling to hold on when we mine coal. When there's no more coal left to be mined, or we're not mining it there for some other reason, there's not an economic base there, or an industry base for them to survive. This highway can save southern West Virginia and southern Appalachian, the coal fields of southern Appalachia. I'm convinced of it. It's the single best thing that we could do from an infrastructure standpoint to give a large segment of our population hope. Without it, they have none. And unfortunately, caught up in the politics and the rhetoric of the anti-mining movement that's out there right now is this highway's at risk of not being finished. And that would be one of the greatest tragedies.
And mining's
ever.
already played an important role.
Well, without,
relates to that
I think it's
highway.
worse, maybe I should go back. Without coal mining, that road would never even be discussed. I mean, we don't have enough money to pave the roads we have now, and this road, the opportunity to build a 4-lane highway across the tops of the mountains. We've never done that in this country. We build roads up the valleys and go through a pass and go down the other side. This road is being constructed across the tops of the mountains. It's a beautiful view. The developable land for future investment is right there beside the road, and it can connect Interstate 64 at Huntington with Interstate 77 at Bluefield, and be probably the single best thing that could happen to this state. And it's at risk of not being done because mining has come under attack. And I've tried to have that conversation outside of the politics of it. And I understand the politics of it as well as anybody, but just looking at it from the road and from what it means for West Virginia's future, I've tried to have that conversation with EPA, and that's unfortunate that they can't even break away from the rhetoric for a few moments to have a really important discussion about what would be the best thing that could happen to southern West Virginia.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to penetrate that over time. I know there's a lot of people that share your sentiments and that have joined with you in your quest to try to get that done down there. It would be just a remarkable advantage for the state overall, not just especially that section of the state. And Bill, I know there's a lot of, I think there's a whole list, even though we haven't been doing the planning as well as we are today, for the life of mining. I mean, there's some excellent examples out there, commercial, industrial, recreational facilities around this state that just seems to have, over the past decade, just popped up everywhere.
Well, there's a long list, Chris, of those kind of developments and the kind of beneficial use of mining land. And, the city of Weirton, for instance, a big chunk of that is built on land that was mined years and years ago. And Mike Starvacci had the vision that he was going to mine it and then use it for the development of the industrial part of Weirton up there, as well as the agriculture part. And it kind of started there, and then it transcended into southern West Virginia. And as Randy said, it's been absolutely instrumental recently in the construction of highways. And, if we move the dirt to mine the coal the first time, then if the counties can figure out what they want to use that land for, they don't have to move it again. And that's usually the largest expense that's involved in steep slope development.
Not only that, but I've heard practically everyone, without exception, that becomes aware that traditionally OSM in particular will require that everything be removed once that mining operation is finished or the reserve base is mined.
Well, in order to get your bond,
buildings.
in order to get your bond released, you got to rip the electric out, you got to rip the road up, you got to take everything out. You put all this infrastructure in for the mine office and to service the operation. And in order to get your bond released by the federal government, you got to take it all out. And it's usually up a hollow somewhere. There has been absolutely no development, probably no electrification. And now all of a sudden you have that up there, but in order for the company to complete its operation in terms of the federal government standards, you got to take all of that out unless there's a use for it. And sometimes it's difficult to look 20 years in advance and think, what will I use that land for? So it takes a forward-looking person to do that.
Randy, I noted a couple weeks ago you were featured in the local newspaper holding up a couple trophy bass, and the article went on to say that that's one of your pastimes or second loves, if you will. It occurred to me that we can argue mayflies or perhaps some local impacts adjacent to a mine site or an industrial site here or there, but I don't think anyone can argue that the overall quality of our water has just really improved over the years.
Yeah, it absolutely has. I use the Kanawha River as a great example. I mean, it runs right by the Capitol, literally runs over top of the Capitol steps that go down into the river there. And this river is one of the most diverse water bodies in the country, the different species of fish and other aquatic life that are in it. We fish competitively a lot on the river. The water is certainly cleaner by any measurable standard than it was even 20 years ago. I mean, when I first started fishing the river as a youngster, 35 years ago, there were not very many fish, catfish and carp, and now it's just, I mean, and it's just clean. I mean, it drains the heart of the southern coal fields in West Virginia. You know, the very coal fields that you know, that we have spent the past generation going from almost no regulation to what we have today in air and water and land reclamation, and it's paid dividends. I mean, it's cleaner today. And so is the Kanawha Valley. I mean, you know, it's known historically as the Chemical Valley. We have pictures from the 70s, and you could barely see from one side of the valley to the other. And we don't have those days here anymore. It's you know, things are cleaner, and we're seeing that across the country. A combination of federal environmental acts and then a comparable state laws have made for a better environment for everybody.
Well, it's interesting. I think same can be said about, you know, most other watersheds where you see a lot of competitive fishing. Bill, I know that the Coal Association is joined with one of the major bass federations up in the northern part of the state.
Right. Yeah, on the Mon River.
And they all attest to how that has been cleaned.
It has, yeah. We last year during the tournament, they talked about the diversity that the river now enjoys, and you know, you hear a lot about it, and it has a history of acid mine drainage and a lot of impacts, but they've restored and they've come back for many of the reasons Randy said. I think there's a lot more stewardship thought that goes into industrial mining development, residential development for that matter, and people want to preserve that. So, and as Randy said, the air quality is important, and we're on just the cusp of what is likely to be a very dramatic time here with EPA wanting to control carbon dioxide. While the science is still out on it, and they're really punishing our people here with the uncertainty that's created.
Next big challenge probably for the coal industry and the primary regulatory agency has to be these new air and climate change rules that EPA are proposing at this point. I don't think we have a whole lot of time to get into it right now.
No.
Want to get you back and talk about that, but maybe just take a couple seconds and reflect on some of the demands that poses for the agency.
Well, I guess I want to start out maybe a little bit big picture and comprehensively. What concerns me is this is a global. Again, aside from the debate over whether it exists or not, we don't need to get into that. If it's a global problem, it requires a global solution. You don't give away your economic advantages